I always find it interesting when we have such a popular food product today that we have literally almost infinite choices in. And in the 18th century, it was just introduced. Maybe there's a single solitary variety. Today we're looking at pasta, and the first kind of pasta that gets introduced into English cookery and American cookery. We're talking about vermicelli. And I think this is hilarious because today, if you go in the grocery store, there's literally like 30 to 40 feet of pasta shelf, right? There are a half a dozen brands, there are a million kinds of shapes. They even make pasta out of mushrooms and out of like chickpeas and beans. It's weird, but almost none of them are labeled vermicelli, which is the only kind you find in the 18th century. So where do we get started with vermicelli? It's pasta coming from Italy. We don't see it really in English cookery even mentioned until there's a dictionary in about the year 1600 when they tell us about this idea of vermicelli. I don't think it's actually in English cookery yet at all. The first time we see it in cookbooks is in Sir Kennel Digby's book, and that's about 1669, and we have a reference to using vermicelli. It also shows up in an early 18th century cookbook about, I think, 1717. Again, they use it in a soup. It's very simple, and both of these books, The Closet Opened by Digby and this court cookery book, they are very, very high-end cooking. And they're cooking French dishes or Italian dishes, and that's why we get this vermicelli being sort of brought into English cookery. I don't think it really hits the mainstream until we get to see Eliza Smith's The Complete Housewife. And that's about 1735 or so and 1740. Early on, she uses it in a soup, and I think in an asparagus soup. But then later on, like I think it's in the 1740 edition or so, she uses it as a vermicelli pudding. And that's what we're gonna be making today. First, we're gonna make vermicelli, and then we're gonna make this amazing, just killer pudding. And I remember this pudding. We did an episode 11 years ago on this pudding. I still remember the flavor of it, and I haven't cooked it since, so you know it's good. So this vermicelli recipe alone is very easy. It's very interesting because this vermicelli recipe doesn't happen when Eliza Smith cooks it or these other cooks. It happens when Hannah Glass comes in another decade or so later. And Hannah Glass says, well, actually, this is probably after she sold her cookbook. So whoever updated her cookbook, we don't know who it is, but they give us a vermicelli recipe and they say, you know, it's better if you make it yourself because the stuff you buy at the store that's imported, it's stale. It doesn't taste good. So they give us this recipe for the ultra simple, basically an egg noodle. All we need are flour and egg yolks. That's what we're gonna be doing. Right now, let's make some vermicelli. Here's Hannah Glass's 1765 edition, and let's read this recipe. It's not huge, and interestingly enough, it could be much shorter, but here we go. Mix the yolks of eggs and flour together into a pretty stiff paste so as you can work it up cleverly and roll it as thin as possibly you can roll the paste. Let it dry in the sun. When it is quite dry, with a very sharp knife, cut it as thin as possible and keep it in a dry place. It will run up like little worms, as vermicelli does, though the best way is to run it through a coarse sieve whilst the paste is soft. If you want some to be made in haste, dry it by the fire and cut it small. It will dry by the fire in a quarter of an hour. This far exceeds what comes from abroad, being fresher. This whole recipe is just wrong. It is wrong. I don't know why the directions are like this, and I'm not sure whether the person who wrote it had actually done it. Because these are egg noodles. All you really need to do is, yes, make it up into the stiff paste, and of course they don't give us any ratios at all. You know, it's just like, well, take some yolks and some flour and just make it, okay? We're gonna do that, and then roll it out as thin as possible, and then dry it, and then cut it. I don't get that. I don't know how you dry it and then you cut it. And then they're like, oh, maybe you could make it by squeezing it through a sieve. Well, I tried that, and that is impossible. It will not work like that. Or at least I certainly couldn't make it work. no matter how soft the paste was, I could not get it to squeeze through something into little worms and make the right thing. When I prepared this, I used about a pound of flour, which is way too much. We only need 5 ounces of noodles for our recipe, so let's not make a whole pound of it. I'm gonna start off with 8 ounces of flour here, and my guess is we'll need about 8 egg yolks. It depends on how big your eggs are and how big the egg yolks are. So we're gonna mix this up into the firm paste that she talks about. Actually, this is fairly soft, but that's all right. It's not gonna make any real difference how stiff it is. The fun part about a recipe like this is so utterly simple that it is a great recipe to do with kids. A lot of times kids want to get in there and do some cooking, and making these noodles, very fun and very easy to do, and it makes a fun dish when you get done with it. They have an interesting look to them. It's fun. They can make different shapes if they really want to. So I really suggest it. I was at Kalamazoo just the other day, had a lot of different viewers come in, shake my hand, talk to me, and multiple different families. And watching the kids interact with the videos and be interested in cooking is always fascinating to me. So I really encourage you to get the kids in on a project like this. It's a lot of fun. I rolled this out pretty thin, and now it's time to cut this up. Yes, this takes a while, but making food should take some time. We should take time and have fun making our food, have fun eating it. The directions call for using a knife. Now, if you're doing this with kids, I would suggest using a pizza cutter. It's actually much easier than using a knife like these directions, but they didn't have pizza cutters in the 18th century, so we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way. Since we don't need to use these in big long strips, vermicellis don't need to be very long. We can just kind of bunch them onto our baking sheet. You could try drying these in the sun. I did mine in the oven, like the directions say, and just put your oven at about 200 and just leave them in there for about an hour. They won't bake, they'll just dry out, and that's all we're looking for. When you do bunch them up though like this, they will, once you take them out, they'll kind of break into little pieces. That's fine, it works just fine. My vermicelli is out of the oven, and I've kind of broke it up into usable pieces here. Now, we're gonna use it in a classic recipe for the time period, one that isn't classic for us today. Now, they did use this in soups and other ways, mostly in soups, but this vermicelli pudding is tremendous. And it shows up again in the middle of the 18th century. This version of it is in the Universal Cook by John Townsend. Not related apparently, but maybe. Here we go. A vermicelli pudding. Boil 5 ounces of vermicelli in a quart of milk till it is tender with a blade of mace and the rind of lemon or Seville orange. Sweeten it to your taste and add the yolks of 6 or 8 eggs and the whites of 4. In other words, you want to have twice as many yolks as you have just full eggs. Have the dish ready covered with a paste. Just before you set it in your oven, stir in a half a pound of melted butter and a little salt does it. If you have no peels, you can use a little orange flower water. Again, very simple. I've got some milk starting to heat up. You have to be really careful. He actually says to boil it in milk. We aren't gonna boil it in milk. Having milk continuously boil is not easy. It'll burn, it'll scald, it'll taste bad. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna bring this milk up to temperature, not to a very light simmer, and then we're gonna put in our 5 ounces of vermicelli, and we're gonna let it kind of steep and simmer. We're not gonna boil it. I also added here some lemon zest and a little bit of mace. Yes, like all the 18th century recipes, this has a version of nutmeg in it. Mace is the outer covering of the nutmeg. It has a little bit more gentle flavor than a typical nutmeg does. If you don't have mace, you can grind a little nutmeg in there. As the recipe calls for, sweeten to taste. I'm gonna add maybe a half a cup of sugar to this. It really depends on how much sweetness you want. Our pudding is made in a pie crust, so let's make some pie crust. This is super simple and easy to do. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look like a store crust. You can do this at home. Let's do a 3-to-1 recipe on this. The ratio is 3 of flour, 2 of butter, and 1 of water. Super easy to remember. This pie crust does not need to be huge. We just need one. So we've got 12 ounces of flour. I've got 8 ounces of butter and about 4 ounces of water. We take the flour in our bowl. Let's add our butter and we want to rub this in. You're trying to get the cold butter to mix with the flour in as gentle a means as possible. You don't want the butter to heat up. So I'm just grabbing this for a second and rubbing it in. You can use other modern tools to get that done in a little easier manner, but in the 18th century, you would rub this butter in. Once it's fully in there and crumbly, we can add in our 4 ounces of water or so. You can kind of sneak up on this. So try 2 ounces of water, then to 3, then to 4, until you get it into your pie crust stiffness. Our pie crust is ready. And the milk with the noodles, with the vermicelli, has cooked long enough. Now it's time to start to put this all together so we can put it in the pie crust. Now, the recipe here calls for the yolks of 6 or 8 eggs along with like 4 whites. So we're gonna go ahead and crack up some eggs here. I'm gonna put in 4 full eggs and add another 4 yolks, and then we can stir that into our milk mixture. Make sure the milk mixture is not too hot or you will scramble your eggs, and you don't want that. We can temper this a little bit if we want, and then mix them all together. And once that's all together, we can pour it into our pie crust. Now, once it's in the pie crust, interestingly, this recipe says at the very end, just before you put it in the oven, add a half a pound of butter to this. So I think I'm gonna mix in our melted butter just before we pour it into our pie crust. We don't wanna mess up our pie crust. So then we can pour it into our pie crust. After that, it's ready to go in the oven. And this will take approximately an hour to an hour and 15 minutes in your oven at 350 degrees. Our vermicelli pudding is out of the oven, and I let this cool overnight. It's set up really firmly. That was the thing I worried about most. When you put something like this in the oven, you're worried that if it doesn't cook all the way, it's gonna stay liquidy and what. That didn't happen at all. In fact, I left mine in for an hour and 15 minutes just in case, but it firmed up perfectly. It came out in a nice, beautiful looking slice here. It smells tremendous, just like I remembered. So we can give this a try, and we're gonna take off a little bit here. And you can tell it, I mean, it really holds together really well. Whoop. Great flavors. We get a little bit of that mace in there. I could have put a little bit more in, maybe even put some nutmeg on it. It's got the right kind of a lemony flavor to it. And of course, it's wonderful and sweet, and it has all those wonderful textures of our vermicelli noodles. So this one turns out great. I highly recommend it. You might want to taste that batter, even though it's uncooked, about whether you get enough sugar in it. That's really the test. They give us the, put as much as you want in it. I probably could have put a little bit more in this one. It would have been perfect. If you're interested in more about pasta in the 18th century, we have a whole episode where we make a pasta press and we make some amazing pasta pieces in there. So make sure to check out this episode.